The storm had not let up by morning. Snow fell thick and steady, blanketing every branch, roof, and forgotten tire track in silence. The sky was still that solid pewter gray, and the temperature outside remained locked well below zero. Claire Bowman stood by the small window in her kitchen, the baby cradled tightly in her arms, her breath misting the pain. Rowan, she had whispered the name again and again in the dark, was sleeping now, nestled in a thick wool wrap Claire had once used for injured foals. Her skin was no longer blue, her breath no longer shallow. Tiny fingers peeked from beneath the folds, curling and uncurling against Claire's sweater. Behind them, near the hearth, the German shepherd still lay unmoving. Claire had left a bowl of water beside him, untouched. The gash along his side had stopped bleeding thanks to the clotting powder, but the swelling in his rear leg had worsened. She would need help, especially if the injury ran deeper than she could see. Claire moved slowly, gently lowering Rowan into the repurposed laundry basket now padded with fleece and towels. The baby didn't stir. A small wheeze passed her lips, but otherwise she slept as if she'd known this warmth all her life. Claire lingered a moment, brushing a strand of hair from the infant's forehead, then stood and crossed to the dog. He watched her, not entirely alert, but aware. His eyes followed her hands as she examined his hindquarters again, this time with a more clinical eye. The strain felt deep, possibly a torn ligament. There was scarring here, too, older, crisscrossing his left hip. A dog that had known hardship, fights, abuse. "You're a mystery," she murmured, "but I've seen enough working dogs to know you weren't just some stray." A sharp knock cut through the quiet. Claire turned, startled. The sound was rare out here, especially in weather like this. She rose, wiped her hands on her flannel shirt, and opened the door. A woman stood just beyond the threshold, snow clinging to the shoulders of her navy parka. She was in her early 60s, tall and thin as a fence post, with graying auburn hair pulled into a braid that hung over her right shoulder. Her cheeks were windburned, her nose slightly crooked from an old break, and her eyes, steel blue, unblinking, took everything in without a flicker of emotion. In one hand, she held a large leather satchel, scuffed from years of use. "Claire," the woman said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation, "I came as soon as I saw your radio post." Claire exhaled, relief washing through her shoulders. Sarah Lang, thank God. Dr. Sarah Lang had been the only other veterinarian within 70 miles for over 2 decades. A mobile vet, she lived alone out past the canyon edge, where she kept horses and rarely came into town unless there was a birth or a bullet wound. Sarah had a reputation, part gruff, part ghost. She rarely spoke more than necessary, preferred animals to people, and still carried the silent grief of having lost her only son, Peter, to a fentanyl overdose 10 years ago. Since then, she had stitched her sorrow into practicality, burying herself in work and never staying too long in any one place. She knelt beside the shepherd without prompting, her gloved hands already at work. "What do we know?" she asked. "Brought a baby to my door during the storm," Claire said softly, strapped to his back. "Still can't believe it myself." Sarah looked up, her brows raising just slightly. "And she lived?" "She did. I'll be damned." Sarah examined the gash, then pressed her fingers gently along the dog's haunch. "Ligaments torn deep, but it'll heal with rest and antibiotics." "You get fluids into him yet?" Claire nodded. "Subcutaneous, 500 milliliters." Sarah grunted in approval. "Good. We'll need a loading dose of broad spectrum. I've got cefaucelin in the truck." She stood, brushing off her knees. "And I want to scan him." "You brought your reader?" "Of course I did." Outside, the wind rattled the shutters as Sarah returned with her scanner and a small medical cooler. Claire held her breath as Sarah passed the handheld device along the shepherd's shoulder and neck. For several seconds, nothing. Then, a faint beep. "There's a chip," Sarah murmured. "Faint, either old or degraded. I'll have to run it through the National Registry once I'm back." Claire watched the shepherd blink slowly. "He's someone's dog," she whispered, "but he chose to carry her to safety." "He chose right," Sarah said, glancing toward the makeshift cradle near the heater. Claire hesitated. "What are the chances they were in a vehicle?" "High," Sarah said. "This storm swallowed the highway." Claire nodded slowly. "He's too injured to have walked that far unless something pushed him." Sarah pulled a thermos from her coat pocket and handed it to Claire. "Drink this. You're shaking." "Thanks." They stood in silence as the wind whistled at the seams of the old cabin. Claire spoke first. "I think I need to follow his path, see where he came from. There might still be someone." Sarah didn't argue. "You have to know. But not without backup, and not without telling May." May Donovan was the sheriff of Eagle Pass, tough as railroad steel and twice as hard to bend. Claire had always respected her, even if she kept her distance. But if there was wreckage out there, May needed to know. "I'll radio her," Claire said. "You'll keep watch on Rowan?" Sarah nodded. "The girl's safer here than anywhere else in the world right now. Go." Claire moved quickly, pulling on snow gear, grabbing her flashlight, first aid bag, and a small pack of baby formula in case there was a miracle still waiting in the cold. She turned back before stepping out. "If she wakes, tell her I'll be back soon." "She won't know what you're saying." Sarah's tone softened, "but she'll feel it." Then Claire stepped into the snow. The shepherd stirred, weak, but aware. His eyes tracked her movements to the door, then to the horizon. Claire looked back once, then pressed forward, following the faint line of paw prints, barely preserved under the fresh snowfall. The trail wound past the tree line, over a small ridge, and into the deeper wood. She followed, breath shallow, snow creaking under her boots. She didn't know what she would find, but she owed it to him, and to the girl. The snow deepened as Claire pushed farther into the woods, her boots sinking past the ankle with every step. The ridge behind her, the one that held her cabin in its arms, faded into a white haze. The trail was barely visible now. The dog's paw prints, faint as breath on glass, led her across a shallow, frozen creek and beneath low-hanging spruce boughs heavy with ice. Every so often she paused, letting the wind settle, listening for any unnatural sound, an engine, a cry, a memory waiting to be found. She had been walking for nearly 45 minutes when she spotted it, a thin line of broken trees. Branches cracked, snow churned violently, her breath caught. At the base of the slope, half buried in a snowbank and camouflaged in silence, was the overturned chassis of a car. Claire picked her way down the incline carefully, her gloved fingers gripping a branch to steady herself. The vehicle was a silver SUV, late model, its frame bent like a crushed soda can. The windshield was spider-webbed with fractures. The rear doors hung open, one twisted unnaturally. Around the wreckage, the snow had melted slightly from engine heat, revealing broken glass and scraps of fabric. She circled slowly, breath shallow. Then she saw her, a woman slumped against the base of a tree, half covered in snow. Her coat was torn and singed, her dark hair matted with ice, her face pale and still. One arm lay curled beneath her body as if she had cradled something, and Claire knew what that something had been. This was the girl's mother. Claire knelt beside her, checking reflexively for a pulse. Cold, no sign of life. Her features were delicate, late 20s, maybe 30, freckles, a strong jaw, long lashes rimmed in frost. In the breast pocket of her coat was a burned wallet. Claire pulled it free, opened it slowly, and saw a name, Autumn Reyes. A folded picture inside showed Autumn holding a newborn, her eyes in the photo shining with fierce joy. Claire bowed her head. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but she's safe. Your girl, she made it." There was no sign of anyone else, just the car, the snow, the silence, thick as grief. But Claire wasn't ready to leave yet. Something compelled her to check the wreckage, as if part of the story remained untold. She opened the passenger side door, now half off its hinges, and found a duffel bag inside, waterlogged but zipped tightly. Inside, a bottle, a pacifier, a small knitted cap, and a piece of paper torn from a spiral notebook. On it, scrawled in quick, shaky writing, "If anything happens to me, please let her be raised somewhere quiet, where people are kind. Her name is Grace." Claire folded the note with care, slid it into her coat pocket, and stood in the stillness. She whispered, "Grace, that's her name." Then, slowly, she turned to head home. Back at the cabin, the storm had eased into a thick, glittering mist. The fire still burned. Inside, Sarah Lang sat cross-legged on the rug, sharpening a scalpel under the firelight with a whetstone. Her long limbs were folded with careful economy, her posture rigid even at rest, making her appear more statue than woman. The baby slept beside her in the basket, a knitted cap now warming her head. Sarah glanced up as Claire entered, her eyes taking in every detail: the snow clinging to Claire's boots, the crease between her brows, the dampened duffel bag slung over one shoulder. "You found them," Sarah said quietly. Claire knelt by the hearth. "The mother's gone. She died protecting her, but she left a note. Her name is Grace." Sarah nodded once. "It fits." She wrapped fresh gauze around the shepherd's flank. She planned for it. Claire, she knew the odds. She packed formula bottles, named her in writing. Smart woman, strong. "You're going to keep her," Sarah said flatly. It wasn't a question. Claire's hands stilled. "I should report her to the county. Let them process it." "They'll process her right into the system," Sarah shot back. "You know how that goes. Best case, she's bounced between foster homes. Worst case." Claire met her eyes. "I know," she said softly, "but I can't just take her. I'm not her blood." Sarah lifted the dog's blanket to check the swelling. "Neither is half the world who ends up raising kids. Blood doesn't feed a child, doesn't stay up rocking her through the night. You already chose her, Claire, just like that dog chose you." Claire looked over at the shepherd, who lifted his head slightly at the sound of her voice. His ears twitched. His gaze met hers, slow, weighty, filled with something more than animal instinct. "I think his name is Atlas," Claire whispered. "He carried the weight of the world." Sarah didn't smile, but something in her posture softened. "Then I'll log him as Atlas," she said. "Male, adult German shepherd, approximately 6 years old, prior trauma to hind leg, possible K9 background." Claire chuckled faintly. "You're already writing the file." "I've always believed in records," Sarah said, "especially for miracles." Later that evening, after Sarah had gone and the fire had dimmed to a low pulse of embers, Claire sat with Grace in her lap and Atlas curled nearby. She held the baby close, rocked gently, and whispered words she hadn't even realized she remembered. Lullabies her mother had sung, lines from old books, nonsense syllables that carried the rhythm of comfort. And Grace, for the first time, cooed, not loudly, just a soft breath of sound that filled the small cabin like sunlight. Claire blinked back tears. "You were loved, Grace. You still are." Outside, the snow had stopped entirely. The sky over Eagle Pass cleared just enough for the stars to pierce through like nail points of light. And inside the quiet cabin, 3 souls rested, one seeking healing, one guarding silently, and one just beginning. The morning arrived soft and brittle as thawed glass. The storm had passed, leaving behind a hush that blanketed Eagle Pass in frost and stillness. Snow glittered under the reluctant light, as if the mountain itself were holding its breath. Claire Bowman stood by her cabin's front window, a mug of reheated coffee in hand. She had barely slept. In the cradle by the fire, baby Grace stirred, gently wrapped in the same wool that had warmed dozens of orphaned lambs and colts over the years. But never a child. Atlas lay on the rug just a few feet away, still and silent but awake. His head was up now, ears flicking at the occasional creak of old wood or shifting snow. Claire watched him for a long moment, studying the tension in his body. It wasn't pain, she recognized that easily, but something else. A coiled alertness, a waiting. She set the mug down and stepped closer to the door, ready to face whatever came next. And crouched beside him, resting a hand gently along the base of his ear. "What are you listening for, boy?" Atlas's gaze shifted toward the door. Claire blinked. "You want to go out?" He didn't move, just held her in that steady amber stare, then slowly, deliberately, lifted his front paw and placed it forward. She saw it then, not just instinct, but intention. She grabbed her coat. They left Grace in Sarah's care. The older vet had arrived just before dawn, bringing supplies and a small folding crib she'd found in her attic. She hadn't said anything about the dark circles under Claire's eyes, or the way her voice caught when she spoke Grace's name. She simply took the baby, adjusted the bottle temperature, and settled into the rocker by the stove with a silent nod of approval. Claire and Atlas set off slowly. The shepherd limped, but didn't falter. Every few yards, he stopped, nose to the snow, ears twitching, then pressed forward again. Claire followed, flashlight swinging at her hip, boots crunching quietly through fresh drifts. They moved east, away from the road, beyond the ridge where Claire had first found the wreck. She hadn't thought to explore farther, had assumed the answers were behind her, not ahead, but Atlas seemed certain. They passed a fallen pine, half-buried fencing, and the remnants of a small fire pit beneath a stone overhang. Claire paused there, inspecting the blackened ash. Someone had stayed here recently. There were torn food wrappers, a scorched blanket half buried under snow, and boot prints, small, maybe a woman's. Atlas nosed one corner of the blanket and sat. Claire crouched beside him and saw it, a patch burned, but legible, sewn into the fraying fabric, Wilder County Utilities. Her breath caught. It matched the jacket Grace had been wrapped in. This wasn't a random crash site. They had been living out here, hiding. Claire looked around. A rusted shovel, a metal wash basin, a small plastic bear toy poking out of the snow. She had a plan, Claire whispered. She wasn't just driving, she was surviving. Atlas let out a low sound, not quite a growl, more like a sigh, then moved again. Claire followed, heart pounding. The trees grew tighter as they approached a ravine, the snow thinning where the slope dropped sharply into a narrow valley. At the base, partially hidden beneath a tangle of broken branches and snow, was a structure, a hunting blind, or an old trapper's cabin long forgotten. Its roof sagged, walls scorched at the base. The air smelled faintly of old smoke. Atlas stopped at the edge, tail low, body rigid. Claire descended carefully. When she reached the cabin's remains, she brushed snow from a partially collapsed door and ducked inside. The interior was blackened from fire, but one corner remained intact. There, under a pile of singed bedding, lay a child's car seat, melted along one edge. Nearby, a broken frame held a photograph. Autumn Rhea, younger, smiling wide, her arms around a man with deep-set eyes and dark hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. Claire stared. A note was tucked behind the frame, written in pencil on the back of a utility bill. "If I don't make it, please tell him I tried. Tell her I love her." Claire folded the note carefully and pocketed it. She turned to Atlas. "You found her here, didn't you? When the fire started, you got her out." Atlas looked at the doorway, then back to Claire. He limped toward the blackened cradle, sniffed the edge, then lay down beside it. Claire knelt beside him, tears burning behind her eyes. "You didn't just carry her," she whispered. "You chose her." They stayed a while longer. Claire took photos with her phone, collected the burned ID tags from the doorpost. One still legible, Ranger Site 14A. Then they turned to head back, Atlas following silently. That afternoon, a knock sounded at Claire's door. Not Sarah, not May. Claire opened it to find a man standing at the edge of the porch, his coat dusted with road salt and snow. He was in his mid-30s, tall and wiry, with wind-chapped cheeks, a 3-day beard, and long dark hair tied loosely at his neck. His eyes, deep hazel, sunburned at the edges, searched her face without apology. "My name's Lucas Bray," he said. I think you have my daughter." Claire didn't move. Behind her, Atlas had already risen, standing between her and the doorway. Lucas's eyes flicked to the dog, then back. "I'm not here to fight you," he said. "I just want to see if she's okay." Claire studied him. The resemblance was there, the nose, the chin, the same shape of the brow as Autumn in the photo. "How did you find me?" He lifted a folded flyer from his pocket, saw her picture on the ranger station's board, said a dog carried her through a storm. I recognized her blanket and Atlas. Claire stepped aside. "You'd better come in." The kettle whistled low, a tired sound that barely pierced the hush filling the cabin. Claire poured hot water into 2 chipped mugs and slid one across the table. Lucas Bray accepted it without a word. His hands were rough, calloused. The hands of a man who'd worked outdoors long past when others would have quit. He wrapped them around the mug like it was a lifeline, but didn't drink. His eyes kept drifting to the bassinet near the fire. Grace slept, cheeks flushed with heat, her tiny fists curled close to her chest. Atlas lay beside her, head resting on his paws, one ear slightly cocked as if still listening to the wind. Claire watched the man across from her as he tried to find a way to speak. "I didn't know she was born," Lucas finally said, voice low, rough. "Autumn and we were in and out of shelters. I left for a job in Idaho last spring, construction site near Coeur d'Alene. We were supposed to meet back in Missoula once I had a place ready." Claire stayed quiet. When I came back, she was gone. I checked every shelter, clinic, county record I could. Nothing, just silence. I kept searching, but no one had seen her since July. He reached into his coat and pulled out a photograph. It was worn and bent, but still clear. Autumn sat on a bench by a lake, smiling into the camera. Her hand rested on her pregnant belly. Lucas knelt beside her, one arm around her shoulder. Claire studied the image. It was real, not a story, not a plea, just two people caught between hope and survival. She named her Grace, Claire said softly. Lucas's head lowered, his shoulders trembling. She used to whisper to her before she was even born, said she'd be light in the cold. Claire felt something shift in her chest. She stood and walked to the bassinet. Grace stirred as she approached, making a soft squeak in her sleep. Claire bent gently, lifted her, and brought her to Lucas. "She's safe," Claire said, but it wasn't just Autumn, the dog, Atlas. He carried her through the snow, strapped her to his back, and brought her to my door. Lucas blinked hard. "She told me about him, said she found him chained up near a fire tower, starving, but he wouldn't leave her once she fed him. She saved him," Claire murmured, "and he saved her." Lucas didn't reach for the baby, he just looked. "I don't want to take her from here," he said. "I don't have a home, not one she could live in. I just needed to see her, to know she was alive." Claire nodded, holding Grace closer. Atlas thumped his tail once and stood slowly. He walked over and sat between her and Lucas, watching, waiting. "I can help," Lucas said quietly. "I can haul wood, fix fences. You probably need someone to muck stalls." Claire looked at him for a long moment. "I'll give you the guest loft. It's cold and drafty." He smiled faintly. "Sounds better than a truck cab." That night, Claire found herself lying awake longer than usual. Grace had gone back to sleep after her last bottle, now tucked in with a fresh blanket Sarah had brought that morning. Lucas had retired to the loft without another word. His boots rested by the wood stove, still damp. Claire opened her journal and wrote, "He didn't come to claim her. He came to remember her, and that somehow makes him part of her story too." Outside, the wind rose again, brushing across the windows like a passing thought. Atlas stirred from his place near the cradle, but didn't rise. The room was so still, Claire almost missed the knock. It was quiet, deliberate, not Sarah, not May. She opened the door to find a man in his 40s, tall and meticulously dressed, standing beneath the porch light. His coat was dark wool, sharply pressed, with a federal badge barely visible beneath the lapel. His blonde hair was combed back, and he held a leather folio in one hand. "Miss Bowman," he said with a polite smile, "I'm Daniel Price. I'm with Wilder County Child Services." Claire's pulse slowed. "We received an anonymous report," he continued, "regarding an unregistered infant in your care. I'm here to ensure her safety and confirm custody arrangements." Claire didn't move. Behind her, Atlas rose to his feet. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Daniel said smoothly, "but I do need to see the child. May I come in?" Claire opened the door wider but didn't speak. Daniel stepped inside, eyes sweeping the room. His gaze landed on Grace, then on Lucas, who had descended the stairs barefoot, hair tousled. Atlas stood between them, body still, head low. Daniel nodded once. "You're the father?" Lucas lifted his chin. "Yes, biological." "Do you have documentation?" "No, but I have witnesses, shelter records, a pastor in Missoula who helped us." Daniel scribbled something. "M.U. Ms. Bowman?" Claire folded her arms. "I'm the one who kept her alive." Daniel looked up. Something softened in his eyes, just briefly. He walked to the cradle, knelt down, and studied Grace without touching her. Then he stood and closed his folio. "I'll file a temporary observational report," he said, "but there will be a custody review. Expect follow-up." He paused by the door. "For what it's worth," he added quietly, "you're doing a good job." Then he left. The silence that followed was heavier than snow. Atlas relaxed first, returning to his place beside the fire. Lucas leaned against the wall, jaw tight. Claire stared at the closed door for a long moment. "Someone tipped them off," Lucas said. Claire didn't answer. She walked back to the cradle and lifted Grace into her arms. She whispered, "They're not taking you, not without a fight." Morning came with no wind, just light, pale and soft, sliding across the snowbanks like a quiet benediction. Claire stood on the porch with a blanket over her shoulders and a steaming mug in hand, her breath fogging the crisp air. Below her feet, the path leading from the woods to her front door had hardened under the cold. It was the same path Atlas had limped along, carrying a life no one else had noticed, a path that, in just a few days, had become sacred. Inside, Lucas stirred a pot of oatmeal on the stove, humming softly to Grace in her crib. The melody was old, something folklike and wordless, carried from generations before him. He hadn't asked for more than space. He hadn't made promises or asked for permission. He simply stayed and built the day around her. Claire stepped back in, brushing snow from her slippers. "You're up early," she said. Lucas glanced at her, smiling faintly. "I figured I'd give you another hour." "Thanks," she said. Then, after a pause, "You know the county's going to send someone again soon." "I know." He stirred slowly. "I'm not going anywhere." Atlas lay near the hearth, awake but resting. His leg was healing well. He stood more often now, shifted less when he walked. Sarah had brought stronger antibiotics and a proper support brace, grumbling the entire time about county red tape and how dogs with more loyalty than people always got the short end. Sarah Lang had never been sentimental, but Grace had made her softer, even if she wouldn't admit it. That afternoon, Sheriff May Donovan arrived. She didn't knock. May was in her late 40s, built like a ranch gate, broad-shouldered, solid, unbending. Her uniform was crisp, even in snow boots, and her expression dared lies to cross her path. Her steel gray braid was tucked into a fleece collar, and her gloved hand held a manila envelope. Claire opened the door and stepped aside. May glanced once at Atlas, once at Grace, then handed Claire the envelope. "It's done," she said. Claire stared at it. "Done. Custodial guardianship confirmed. Signed by the county judge. Officially filed." Sarah provided the medical affidavit. May added her field report. Lucas's statement helped too. Lucas looked up from his seat near the stove. "I didn't expect." May cut him off gently. "You didn't demand custody. You just showed up and stayed. That counts more than you think." Claire opened the envelope. Inside was a certificate, stamped and signed. Her name, Grace's name. No courtroom, no lawyer, no waiting lists, just home. May nodded once and turned to go, but paused at the door. "Town's having a gathering on Sunday," she said. "Community center. Grace and Atlas are the reason. Might be nice to show up. Let people welcome them in." Claire blinked. "People don't usually hold parties for us." "They do now," May said. Then she left. Sunday came with blue skies and a thaw that sang in the gutters. The community center hadn't seen this many people since the county fair. Folding chairs lined the walls. Children darted under tables, and someone had brought 4 trays of cinnamon rolls still warm from the oven. A banner stretched above the fireplace in hand-painted letters. "Welcome home, Grace and Atlas." The room hushed as Sheriff May stepped to the front, holding a velvet box in one hand and a paper certificate in the other. Her voice was steady but warmer than usual. "Today, we're not just celebrating survival," she began. "We're honoring choice. The choice to protect. The choice to carry hope through the cold. The choice to stay, even when you don't have to." She looked at Claire, then at Atlas, who sat proudly beside the bassinet in a new blue vest with white stitching. "Service companion, guardian class." Atlas, May said, formerly a K-9 rescue unit, was lost, abandoned, and nearly broken. But he did not forget who he was. He carried a child through a blizzard and laid her at the feet of someone who would love her. She knelt and pinned a silver badge onto his vest. He didn't move, but his eyes met hers as if he understood. "For bravery, instinct, and unspoken faith," she said, "we thank you." The room erupted in applause. Someone sobbed in the back. A child offered Atlas a biscuit. He took it gently. Claire stepped forward, holding Grace, now alert, pink-cheeked, wrapped in a quilt made from old flannel shirts. Lucas stood beside her. Neither said much, but the way they stood spoke enough. May handed Claire a second envelope. "This one's for her, a start." Inside, a birth certificate, temporary but official. Grace Bowman. A grandmother in a sunflower scarf shouted, "Amen," and was echoed by half the room. Later, as the chairs folded and voices softened, Claire stepped out into the cold again, Grace sleeping against her chest. Lucas walked beside her, Atlas at her heels. They said nothing as they drove home in Claire's old truck. The world had shifted quietly and without drama. That night, Lucas tucked Grace into her crib, a patchwork bassinet built from what remained of Autumn's things and pieces of Claire's past. Atlas circled once and lay beside it. Claire stood on the porch wrapped in wool, watching stars break over the mountain. Lucas joined her, holding a mug of coffee gone cold. "I found a note," he said quietly, "in Autumn's things, folded into the lining of her duffel." He handed it over. It read, "If I don't make it, let her become someone who remembers love before fear." Claire folded the paper, pressed it to her chest, and whispered, "She already has." Inside, Grace stirred and made a soft humming sound in her sleep. Atlas lifted his head briefly, then settled again. Claire wrote her final line in her journal. "She was carried by a dog, protected by a stranger, and given to me by God. Sometimes miracles do not fall from the sky. Sometimes they walk, bruised, bleeding, and determined, straight to your door. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't come with lightning or trumpets. They arrive on tired legs through snow and silence, carrying life, carrying hope." This story reminds us that even in our darkest seasons, God is still moving, through animals, through strangers, through the quiet acts of love we often overlook. Maybe you're facing something cold and heavy right now, but remember, just like Grace was carried through the storm, God is carrying you, too.
If this tale moved you, if you felt the tension, the heartbreak, and the triumph, please support our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more thrilling, emotional, and inspiring stories your way. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Do you believe dogs have an extraordinary sixth sense? Share your thoughts and personal stories with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.